Hi, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and we'll let people sort of filter in if they will. So I'm Perry Collins. I'm a senior program officer in the Office of Digital Humanities at the National Endowment for the Humanities. How many people know what the NEH is in general? Okay. So you have a sense, we're the largest federal funder of the humanities in the United States, and we have 6 grant-making offices and divisions funding all kinds of work across universities, museums, libraries, and other kinds of nonprofit institutions, as well as individual researchers who are working on often monographs and other kinds of projects in the humanities. So, but today I want to focus on my office, the Office of Digital Humanities, and some of the work that we've been supporting and some of the grant opportunities that we have coming up. So in formulating this session, I was thinking mainly about the projects that we have funded that have really demonstrated the, I think, integral connection between technical development on the one hand and community engagement and partnerships on the other. So thinking about how to wed those two in really effective and strategic ways. I've been at NEH for about 5 years and seen hundreds, maybe thousands of applications at this point. And those that are really, I think, most successful, not only in receiving funding and getting positive reviews from the peer review experts we have coming in, but also those that really have a long life and are able to sustain themselves, are those that really think carefully about who their audience is and how they can really become partners in the process of developing these projects. So unfortunately, you'll see we only have 2 of the 3 panelists here. Our third panelist, Jason Wessaw, of the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi, was taken ill, and I heard this morning was unable to join us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the project we funded for the underlying software to what he's working on. But hopefully at some point we can hear from, thank you. Hopefully at some point, he'll be able to come to MCN or another venue and talk about his own project. So I'm really happy to be joined by 2 terrific panelists. Both are representing NEH-funded projects within the last couple of years. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves briefly, and then I have a short overview about NEH grant funding, and I'm going to go into a little bit of depth, especially on one of our programs that's changed a lot recently. So, Phil, you want to? Yeah.
My name is Phil Sager. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I'm from the Ohio History Connection, and that is formerly used to be the Ohio Historical Society. We're kind of the central hub or node of a large network of historical sites in Ohio. And as for me, most of my job is kind of consumed with working with our digital repository system, which manifests itself. Yeah, sorry. I guess I do have to be right up to the. Yeah. Okay. So which manifests itself in the statewide system we call Ohio Memory. The underlying system for that is Content DM, and that's what I work with quite a lot. But as a developer, I get stretched in a variety of other directions as well. And I could go into more, but I've of course worked on this project for which I'll be speaking in just a moment.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Vendito. I am the project manager for a digital storytelling and archiving project called Immigrant Stories, which I'm thrilled to share with you, along with our brand new website. The project is run by the Immigration History Research Center at the University of Minnesota. Our partner archives are the largest archives of immigrant and refugee life in all of North America. My training is as an immigration historian, as a public historian. So for me, it's all about using technology to remove barriers to participation in creating and preserving history. I'm not about technology for technology's sake. So in this project, we've been really intentional about making sure it truly is open to a broad range of users. That includes people with little technical or just literacy, elders, and non-native speakers of English.
Great. Thanks, both of you. All right, so you're going to hear from Phil and Liz in about 10 minutes or so. I've told them we have a little bit of a cushion since we're missing a panelist, but not too much of a cushion. We're going to try to leave a lot of time for Q&A because I suspect there are some questions. So I want to talk a little bit about NEH as a whole, but then again, more specifically about the Office of Digital Humanities. So This is a chairman's initiative that we have. So every chairman who comes to NEH every few years has their own sort of initiative that helps provide a bit of a framework for us as we think about how to shape our grant programs. Unsurprisingly, some of these are quite broad, and this one, the common good, is no exception. It is very broad, and it's meant to sort of help us think about the ways in which we can reach a broader, more diverse public as the NEH, and sort of overcome both real and sort of, I think, perceptual sense that we are only reaching specific audiences, and often academic audiences. So the common good, again, emphasizes the public humanities, but I think even more than that, asks us as staff and you as potential applicants to think about how the work that NEH funds can help really become more relevant to contemporary kinds of conversations. And I think you'll see some of that in the presentations we have in just a moment. But I think that helps as sort of a guiding framework for some of what we do. One part of the Common Good initiative really affects the Office of Digital Humanities. So the initiative really emphasizes technology both as a method and a mode for engaging audiences, but also thinking about it on sort of the other side, how are we thinking more critically about technology at our institutions and society at large? These are issues and sort of areas that the Office of Digital Humanities has been thinking about for about a decade now. So since we were established in 2006 as the Digital Humanities Initiative, and we became a full-fledged office with our own dedicated grant line in 2008. So it's actually been around quite a while. I think there's often a perception that this kind of funding is brand new. And while we're small and we don't have as much funding as some of our peer divisions within NEH or even other kinds of funding institutions, we have been trying as hard as we can to make this a priority. I will say now, 10 years later, the digital humanities cuts across every single grant program that we have at the endowment in every single division. So we're funding everything from virtual games to web-based scholarly editions to interpretive websites. There are any number of things that might be funded that actually might be funded not within the Office of Digital Humanities at this point. So it might be that you come to me today or in the future and say, I have this great idea, can ODH fund it? And I'll say, well, no, maybe you should get one of our divisions, which actually is a lot better funded. I have a colleague who often likes to liken NEH to a tree. And I think of ODH as sort of the weird lab that creates these varieties of fruit. So we're really trying to think more experimentally. We're trying to think about how can we push the boundaries in terms of our methods and our technologies. How are we going against the grain a little bit? We are, I think, have a slightly higher tolerance for risk than some of our colleagues in other divisions who might be focused much more on sort of using existing best practices and existing technologies and platforms. We are trying to think about sort of the next generation of those. And again, I think you'll see that in these presentations. So I do want to pivot a bit and talk more specifically about a couple of our grant lines. Most importantly for today is a program that technically is new. It's the Digital Humanities Advancement Grants Program. This actually merges two programs that we have had around for quite a few years, our Digital Humanities Startup Grants Program and our Digital Humanities Implementation Grants Program. We've basically squished these together into one pretty large program that allows you to apply for funding either in January or what will be June every year. So this is a bit of an experiment. We're trying here to allow more flexibility as to when you apply, but also to really cut down as much as we're able within the constraints of a federal agency, cut down that time to when you find out whether or not you actually received funding, because that can be such a challenge, especially with some of these technologically driven projects. We just talked about this a little bit in the last session on funding as well. So a couple of things here that are really important to point out. So this is a very open-ended program. Again, there is an emphasis on experimentation. We've tried in some ways to move away from that language of innovation, that things have to be brand new or way cutting edge or really shiny or exciting, because I think there's often a sense that funding agencies are really only want to see that stuff. And while that's exciting, we've tried to move a little bit in sort of a nuanced way, I guess, to this language of experimentation. So that might mean creating a new tool or doing something technically very sophisticated, but it might also mean reaching a new audience, thinking about sort of interinstitutional kinds of collaboration. There are different ways that you can argue for how your project is experimental. But the onus is sort of on you to make that argument in a grant proposal. So there are three areas that this program really emphasizes. The first, again, is thinking about experimental methods or new techniques in building digital humanities projects. The second is thinking a little more analytically, so either sort of from a media studies perspective, thinking about the digital culture and society, or having reports or workshops or meetings to think about the ways in which the digital humanities have affected humanities institutions, or really wrestling with complex problems in the field. We fund a lot of workshops to get people together face-to-face to sort of figure these things out. And then the third thing is a relatively new addition that I hope you all help us spread the word about. This is where we've heard a lot from the field that there's a sense that we can fund something at the very beginning and then it's sort of just over and we expect you to maintain it, till the end of time. And that's not true, but we have really tried to put in language into our guidelines, encouraging projects that in some ways need a facelift, that need to go in and redo the underlying technical architecture of an existing platform, that need to think more about updating web standards and user interface design, that need to sit down and come up with a really up-to-date data management plan or a plan for sustaining the business side of things for a project. A lot of the projects that we've seen in the digital humanities in museums and elsewhere were maybe done 15 years ago at this point, and they really aren't as current. So they might have a lot of great content, but there's a lot that might need to be done to bring them up to where they're actually still useful for the audiences they were intended to reach. So we funded a few projects that are doing something along these lines, but I'd like to see even more. Again, this allows for levels 1, 2, or 3 in funding. So you can apply for a relatively small level 1 award up to $40,000, a level 2 up to $75,000, and then a level 3, which obviously is a much larger scaled up kind of project, up to $325,000. So today you're going to hear from one project that's received what would be a level 2 award, as well as a project that has received a level 3 in the Immigration Stories project. So you'll get a sense, I think, of the different kinds of scale. But we're always happy to talk with you and sort of help you figure out which level of funding is most appropriate for the project that you're thinking about. Two important things with this program as well. This year, we announced a partnership I'm excited about with the Institute of Museum and Library Services. We have always funded a lot of libraries and museums in this program or in our programs, and IMLS has always funded quite a bit of digital humanities work, so there was sort of a natural connection between the two. And so this year, IMLS is actually going to contribute several $100,000 to this program in order to support more museums and libraries. So it's projects that are either driven by or heavily collaborating with libraries and museums, we're really encouraging to apply because there actually is an extra pot of money. It's not just sort of an unfunded encouragement. It's actually something where we have more money to fund those kinds of institutions. We're hoping that will go on in the long term. That's the plan right now, but we'll see. And then the other very experimental new component for us in this program is what we're calling a sustainability match. So again, we've been asked over and over from potential applicants and grantees to think more about how we can fund sustainable projects. This is difficult for us. We are sort of a project-driven agency in how we give grant funding. So this year we're trying to put our money where our mouth is, and I'm sure we'll have to work out some kinks. But the sustainability match basically is if you're applying at the level 3 stage, so sort of the higher level of funding, you can apply for an extra $50,000 in matching funds, meaning that you can come up with ideas for how to think about sustainability, anything from fees for digital preservation, to staff people to actually implement your data management plan that we require you to write, to, again, having workshops around sort of long-term business planning for a project. Anything you can come up with that contributes to the sustainability of a project. We will allow you to apply for an extra $50,000. The catch is that you have to find third-party matching funds, so from foundations or other non-federal sources, to match specifically for those activities. So I think we'll probably won't see too many of these right away, but I'm hoping we'll have some examples after our first deadline happens in January. So hopefully by the middle of next year or so, we'll have some examples of what this looks like, and maybe we'll be able to even refine it a little bit further. But I'm happy to talk to you more about that as well. Okay, so before I pass things over, I do want to do one last plug for another program in the Office of Digital Humanities, and this is our Institutes for Advanced Topics program. This is our professional development program. It funds sort of the development of human infrastructure in the digital humanities. So it funds any number of workshops. Some of them are sort of 2-week, fairly traditional kinds of summer institutes. Some are traveling 2-day workshops that might go to different regions within the country. You are welcome to apply to host a workshop or an institute. You are also more than welcome and really encouraged to actually attend one of these. So this is a photo from an institute we ran around community colleges, but there have been a lot of museum people who have come. I'd like to see even more coming from cultural heritage institutions to some of these workshops. They usually are funded at least in some way, whether travel or a stipend, and graduate students are often welcome to attend as well. So they tend to be fairly flexible. So you should definitely take a look at our website. It's NEH.gov/ODH/institutes. And you can find out more information about sort of the offerings we have on right now. So, all right, I'm going to pass things off to Phil. After we're done with these two, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Jason would have discussed had he been here, and then we'll go into hopefully 15 minutes or so of Q&A.
Okay. So yes, I'm going to be talking about TourSites for WordPress, which is what we got funded for. I've already been through this bit, so I will skip that. I just wanted to mention quickly some of the other important team members on this project. From the Ohio History Connection, there is Ty Pierce, who's in the same department I am, Education Multimedia Services. Jamie Marsh, who helped out in a lot of the production work, Lee for in evaluation. And then our major partner on this that did most of the design and development is the Center for Public History and Digital Humanities, Mark Souther and Aaron Bell especially, who is the person who did the majority of the development work. I did some, but not very much. Then not least is our site partners, without whom this would not be possible, and I'll say much more about them in due course. Just to remind you, we used to be called Ohio Historical Society, and this is the situation I was talking about or referring to earlier. This is our site network. We're located in Columbus, roughly in the center of the state, but we have a vast historic network comprised of museums, historical homes, monuments, et cetera, et cetera. Every imaginable kind of historic site you could think of. So there's a lot of variety, and that poses both challenges and opportunities to us, and in every aspect of our work, not least of which digital. But aside from the diversity of the types, we also have a variety of partnerships with them. Some we manage directly, some are kind of co-managed. Others, they have organizations or groups at the site that do all of the management, and we just are kind of consultants in that relationship. There's all different levels of staffing and funding and expertise at these sites. Same thing with technology. It's all over the map. We have natural history sites where there's barely any. And then we have things like Armstrong Historic Museum, which has much more. One thing they all have in common are incredible stories, and that's a challenge in itself. So the overall challenges for us in sort of considering all of this was how we provide mobile experiences at these sites that are engaging, cost-effective, and sustainable. I just want to take you briefly back to the origin of this. And it starts with an application called Curatescape. This was actually before Ohio History Connection was involved in it. This was in 2011. As a startup grant funded by NEH, involved our current partner, which is the Center for Public History and Digital Humanities. And what they did was provide or created a platform for mobile experiences using Omeka. And it's something that is in use by a large number of organizations to this day, and you can just go to curatescape.org or just type Curatescape in Google and you'll find more. We got involved in this in 2012, and this was also NEH funded, but it was a partnership between our current collaborators, the Ohio, or the Center for Public History and Digital Humanities at Cleveland State University, and us to adapt and extend the Curatescape platform to deal more with object-dense, gallery-oriented museum interiors of the sort that we have in Columbus specifically. And that also has been a successful project for us, and we continue to use that. But this is where we are now. What we really would like is to leverage that whole experience to extend it to our site partners all across the state. And this gets us back to the challenges, the opportunities, and the need for a kind of mobile tour that can be put together and applied in a site environment that has that kind of variety I described before, but make it available in such a way that sites who are, there, as I said before, there are varying degrees of interest and enthusiasm and expertise at these sites. Sites who want to produce their own content and manage it can do so, and then for those who don't, still be able to have a method for working with them to provide them with mobile tours that they can use at their sites and with their visitors. I'm going to skip these two slides in the interest of time, but this has to do with why we moved away from Omeka and towards WordPress as the platform. If you have any questions, I can try and answer them after. But suffice it to say that we, given our needs and the recommendations of the Center for Public History, they recommended that we use a multi-site platform like WordPress. So the goal is to provide a platform that would enable our sites to deliver high-quality mobile tours, and the outputs increase collaboration with our sites, create the product, of course, create tours for at least 3 of our sites, but that will expand much more in the future, evaluate and refine the application. I'm going to skip that slide. This is just a screen cap of the back end of this, showing in WordPress, if you've used it, how you can create, and this is kind of the standard, tour stop, tour or location tour structure that you see in a lot of mobile apps, and it follows that same logic where we've got locations or stops here that they become basically just little thumbnails and descriptions that you can drag and drop into your tours. And then can't show you the rest of that, but that would be a tour, and then you just create that for each site that you want. But the thing I want to really emphasize here is the collaboration with our site partners. This was the most exciting part of it, I think, for us, because sometimes we're viewed with some degrees of suspicion by our site partners. But in this case, that was not the case at all. We were, embraced, and they were very excited and enthusiastic about what we were doing, and wanted to be involved in the process and provide their content and expertise and work towards providing something that they could use in their situation. So it was really a win-win. So the three sites that we started out with were the John Rankin House, the Harriet Beecher Stowe House, and Fort Ancient. The picture we're looking at is the John Rankin House. This is Fort Ancient. Immediately, we got feedback from the people at the sites about the application. I'm not going to go through these bullet by bullet, but that got fed back into the design process and was really, really valuable. And that was even before we did formal user testing. That's actually still, we've already done the testing, but we haven't actually pulled together the results and used that to sort of refine things. So to wrap up, going forward, what we want to do is look at the evaluation results, refine the platform and the TourSites application, and publish it in beta, and eventually migrate it to production, and obviously make the code available to anybody who has an interest in it. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you. So what I'm going to do is just give you a very brief overview of Immigrant Stories, and instead of talking about everything that we do and all of the resources we have, I'm going to focus on this digital storytelling platform, the new story-making website that we've developed with the NEH's support, but I'm very happy to talk to you about the ins and outs of the project or all the resources I have for you after this very quick and two-time presentation. So, as we were talking about, Immigrant Stories is run by the Immigration History Research Center at the University of Minnesota. We've been collecting, preserving, and sharing stories about immigration, especially personal stories of immigration, for more than 50 years. And so we began this project in 2013 because we had recently done a number of digital projects to help capture immigration history and preserve it. And we were interested this time in experimenting with digital storytelling. So if you're not familiar, digital storytelling is a way of creating personal 3 to 5 minute multimedia narratives, not interviews, they are not oral histories. Basically, the participant writes a script, selects their images, and puts this video together. We were excited about the opportunity to have multimedia pieces in the archive rather than just oral histories, which we love and we have in spades, but we thought it'd be interesting to let people do that. Also thought it'd be interesting to turn it over to the participant and say, well, what do you want to talk about? 3 to 5 minutes is not enough time to get your life story, we know that, but it's interesting to tell people from a research point of view, if you could share and preserve one story for the future, what would that be? And we were excited about the possibility. We define migration really broadly. We're not just looking for people who were born in another country. Our project is open to international students, international adoptees, their family immigration stories. All of these perspectives are important. So we have a collection that I think of as broad instead of deep. Instead of having 12 really long oral histories, we have currently more than 200 digital stories representing more than 46 different ethnic groups in the United States. And with the NEH's support, we have been able to expand internationally. We started out pilot project in the Twin Cities, have since grown. I'm really excited about that. Well, so what do we do with these stories? Well, we make them all publicly available. So we're gonna preserve them professionally at the university for the long haul, like all our other archival materials. We also share them through the Minnesota Digital Library, which is a digital public library of America feeder hub. So they're out there in the public, available for people to use. We share, again, we have professional preservation standards, which does affect how we teach digital storytelling. A lot of people are using digital storytelling. There are more things, though, I need to do on my end to make sure we can preserve things. So as you see here, this is a sample page of one of our stories hosted through the Minnesota Digital Library. You can watch the digital story. We also collect certain metadata. It is, for those of you who are library professionals, a bare bones metadata, but we're trying to balance what people are willing to give us with what the researchers and teachers are interested in. And you'll also notice that other tab, we do require a transcription, again for long-term preservation as well as accessibility. So really quickly though, since I don't have time to show you a video, how do you make a story? Or what do we teach people to do? Well, it starts with writing. Again, non-interview project. We've developed a number of writing prompts. If you come to me and you say, Liz, I know what I want to tell, I say go to town. 300 to 500 words, please. But other than that, write about what you want. However, we wanted to avoid this bootstraps narrative that I think very quickly, even if you are new to the United States, you are taught that's what an immigration story is. I came here with nothing, I worked really hard, and now I have something, and now I'm a success. That represents some people's experience. It does not represent everyone's. It's also formulaic, and we thought, what if we gave people the chance to write about what they want? We started off with this first prompt, a story about a significant object, a plane ticket, a diploma, your mother's jewelry, a bag. We found that worked like 50% of the time. 50% of the time, perfect. People are like, I know what to write about. We got really interesting stories. The other 50% of the time, we found out it was really stressful for the participants, and people just angsted about it. In the Twin Cities, we work with a lot of refugees, since a lot of our immigrants locally are refugees. Some people did have objects, but for a lot of people, they said, well, we had to leave. We had to flee in the middle of the night. We don't have anything. And even attempts to be a little more broad about what that object could be weren't so successful. So these are the 4 we came up with: journey story, family story, story about identity. Because we found when we gave people that blank slate in the beginning, they sort of fell into these 4 categories. So you start with some pre-writing. You write a script. 300 to 500 words is standard in digital storytelling. It's the sweet spot for a 3 to 5 minute video. The reason we have that limit on it is because it helps people tell one coherent story. And when you are spending this much time being intentional about what you write, they're actually quite rich. So if you're saying, oh, is this just like a fun activity you do? No, there's an educational value here, both for the person who creates the story as well as the people who listen. We have people kind of plan it out with a simple storyboard, gather media with Creative Commons. Again, we have this educational long-term preservation mission, so we can't just pull whatever you want off of the internet, which most people want to do. Something we have to do here. Have people record their voiceover. Just stick a USB mic into your computer and read your script. So it's your voice telling your own story. It's quite powerful. Then you edit the video together. Over the last 4 years, we have developed a streamlined video editing process. I've used all sorts of software, free, low cost. It really depends on what is at the organization's disposal, either in a library or in a media center. But when we developed our training, I said, okay, what are the basics you need to know? What can I teach you in 15 minutes? So if you have never done this before, and the vast majority of our participants, even young people, even the digital natives, have never done this before, what do you need to know so that you can make a high quality video? And I learned just like a handful of things. I don't teach you everything, or a participant everything they could possibly want to know about video editing. It's overwhelming, it's intimidating, and this is really, I firmly believe, a project for everyone, because I've taught such a broad range of users at this point. So again, we've got 200 stories so far. This is wonderful, but we had a dream. And the dream that the NEH made come true is this beautiful story-making website you should all check out. It's immigrantstories.umn.edu. This is a dream because this is a story-making website. This is not a display portal. We already have the Minnesota Digital Library and the DPLA for that. This website allows anyone to log on, create a free account, and make a story start to finish from scratch for free. So when you create your story, you log in, you go through a series of prompts. You go through some writing prompts, you choose your topic. You have an ability to edit your script. We save as you go. Because that's always a problem on a library computer, right? What happens when you log out? You save as you go. I have 5 different tutorial videos built into the website. They're purposely very brief. Again, I've done this enough to know I probably have lost all of your attention by now. But if I'm talking to you about, video editing, I've definitely lost your attention by now. So they're all brief. They're also hosted on YouTube. But my longest is the actually how do you edit a video together video, and it's 5 minutes long. And it's everything I was telling you. Here are the nitty-gritty basics of what you need to do. You need to import images and video, you need to arrange them. Here's a couple little tricks. We encourage people, and this website is built to facilitate a story that is an audio voiceover, high quality still images with some zooming in effects. That's it. Some people have said, oh, it's like a slideshow. No, it's not. It's a Ken Burn documentary you make yourself, and it's very nice. But the reason we do that is, look, if you come to this website and you are a filmmaker, you can absolutely use it and do something very creative, but I don't want to set that as the bar, because again, like I said before in the introduction, for me, digital technology is all about inclusivity and about saying, well, you have to be a mini Spielberg to do this project, goes against everything that we stand for. But if you do high quality images, and really if you just write a good story, you can have some really powerful videos that you would check out on our website. One more thing to wrap up. Another thing that was, 2 things that was important for us. We pay for video editing software. We have a subscription to an editing service called WeVideo built into the website. So participants don't need to have any sort of editing program because they're expensive. Even the free stuff you often can't download on a school or a library computer. So that's built in. My training is tailored for that. But the final stage, when you're done, there's the option to submit your story to the collection. For ethical reasons, I'll never force anyone to submit their story to the collection. I hope they do. They matter, and having really different perspectives on immigration matters. But what we've also been able to do is make sure that all of the things that we need to preserve this long term, the video file, the transcription, the metadata, and a donation form, or officially a deed of gift for those of you in archives, come to us on my end, because without those 4 things, it's an incomplete donation. If you go through the end, you'll see that all of the language in our site, I spent a lot of time laboring over. It's very clear and direct. I know a lot of our users are non-native speakers of English. We do have translations coming, but even so, I wanted the language clear. I wanted people to understand what they're signing up for. And in that donation form, I worked very closely with our archivists and with legal at the university to get it as simple as possible. It could be better, but if you had seen like the 3-page legalese donation form I started with, this is a huge improvement. But I know this is interesting to a lot of people in archives. I mean, not a lot of people, but it's a click-through donation form. You can sign electronically, but the language is very clear. At certain points, when we're asking for information, and again, it's pretty bare bones for metadata, we'll have a little, why do we need this? To explain, the reason I'm asking you for your year of birth is people want to put you on a timeline, or they might be searching for immigrants from a certain era. That's it. I don't ask, for example, for your whole date of birth because I am as concerned about identity theft as you are. So we've made a lot of these decisions as we've built this website. I officially think of it as in beta. We've done some user testing in July. We'll do more in December. We're currently working around the country to do some workshops, but you could get on this right now. And I think it's a great tool for museums, for after-school programs, if you have camps, or if you have partners with educators. And so I will just wrap it up with, this is where we're going. You can follow us on Twitter too, but you should really just go make a story.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. I do want to very briefly touch on, Jason Wessaw was going to highlight a project that he's been working on with his community that's based on a software platform that NEH has supported, along with the Institute of Museum and Library Services, actually. And this is Mukurtu. Mukurtu was developed in collaboration with tribal governments, museums, archives, individuals, lots of different kinds of communities who are interested in the needs of indigenous communities when it comes to sharing and preserving and protecting their cultural heritage. So this was developed as a Drupal-based content management system, and then NEH has provided quite a bit of support for a mobile sort of supplementary, complementary component to the project as well. And this was developed with the idea of being able to share and also collect stories, images, all the different kinds of things that we see in other kinds of digital collections, but in an ethical way that really responds to the needs of indigenous communities. Particularly, they have developed, I think, a really exciting set of what they're calling traditional knowledge licenses. So these are particular sort of labels. They're not legally binding, but they're ethically binding labels that give more information, especially to those who are coming from outside that community, about how to use materials appropriately, who should have access, when you should have access at different points throughout the year, for instance. And this, again, is something where different communities have been able to install their own instances of Mukurtu and really, I think, refine it in ways that make sense for their communities. So I think something that responds to a very broad community's needs, but also allows for a lot of local implementation in ways that we really like to see. So I hope you'll see with that project and with the ones that we just saw, we're trying to emphasize, again, projects that have a lot of collaboration and community engagement, are building on existing software. Often that software is either free or open source and can easily be sort of widely implemented and adapted by other kinds of institutions. We found projects at different stages. Some of them are still at that pilot stage. They might not really be ready for prime time or for having someone else pick it up really easily, but we're trying more and more to really emphasize documentation and collaboration as ways to help NEH make the case that when we fund one project, we're really funding potentially 10 or 100 different kinds of projects down the line, that there really can be a long tail to the work that we're funding. And it's an ideal and doesn't always happen, but in the meantime, we're doing a lot of really great experimentation and seeing what works and what doesn't work too. So. All right, let's go ahead and take any questions. We have a little over 10 minutes, so I'm going to sit down here.
I'd love to know what successes you guys have had in the open source community when you've made something that's actually getting great use.
Sure. Thanks. I think the project I just talked about, Mukurtu, is one of our prime examples, really, a project that is using open source software and then is making that more widely available with what they're doing. They've had hundreds of institutions pick that up at this point. So that's been really exciting. And they've received grants. They received a smaller sort of planning grant from us, really, I think about 6 or 7 years ago at this point. And just a couple of weeks ago, got a very large grant for the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So they've been able to, I think, in part through sharing and being able to make the case for use of open source software, they've been able to, I think, leverage more funding as well, because they can make the case for how sort of broadly implemented it is. And there are other examples as well, especially at sort of the level 3 level I talked about, once a project has moved beyond the sort of pilot or single institution phase and is scaling up in a big way. And that's definitely something we've put explicitly into our guidelines as well. All things being equal, we really want to see use of open source software. So, yeah.
Question for you, Gray. So what trends are you seeing in the last year or so, last round of applications that might be different than the past? We've seen a lot of crowdsourcing applications done for NEH. NYPL certainly has benefited from a number of those.
Right.
But what trends are you seeing over the next year or so, or the last year or so that you want to highlight?
Sure. I think a trend that we see here in these projects is being a little bit more thoughtful about how we're using technologies that are already out there, particularly to draw in new audiences. I think, we're still funding a lot of sort of tools, but we're also funding a lot of projects that are saying, okay, how can we pull together what we've already seen and try to, have a new angle or bring it to a new audience or find a new partner who maybe wasn't involved before. So I would say that's probably the biggest trend that we've seen. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Again, I think, and we've responded to this in part, the idea of sustaining projects is so much on everyone's mind, especially as some of these projects do sort of age over time. And I think institutions, luckily, have been a little more willing to sort of step up to the plate, or at least to recognize the need for some of these projects to have longer lives. So we've been funding quite a bit more. We funded a report around sustaining digital projects past the startup phase. So sort of once you actually get off the ground and have a project, how do you keep it going in the long term? And they did a lot of case studies on that. So I think that would definitely be another trend and something we're really trying to provide funding to do in a more intentional way, rather than just demanding that you sustain something to actually have that. So, yes.
Is there an area of NEH that also supports the creation of the content for the systems that are being developed as well? Because it seems that the projects presented today are developing the technology to support it, but are there funds going towards then the content that goes into those projects?
Absolutely, yes. I, in part, on purpose, put together this session as a way to say, look, we're funding the systems that underlie the content too, because I think that's often something people don't really necessarily think of NEH as doing, but absolutely. So especially for all of you, our Division of Public Programs 2 years ago launched a program called Digital Projects for the Public. And this is specifically geared around creating born digital kinds of experiences for public audiences, almost always using technology that is already out there. So being able to build on something. Again, they have funded some really interesting kinds of interpretive websites, a lot of games, and it's a very open-ended kind of program. But they will be the first to tell you that they are content first and technology second in a way. It's called Digital Projects for the Public. Yes, so please do go on our website and take a look at some of the other options there too, because the Division of Public Programs is probably most relevant here, but they have a couple of programs that are certainly incorporate technology, but are very much geared on developing the more interpretive kinds of content that goes into it. Whereas we really are, in the Office of Digital Humanities, focusing a little bit more on methodology and platform building. We're funding, obviously, a lot of great humanities content as well, as you can see, but I think with more of an eye toward it being adapted widely rather than being very specific to one project. Anyone else? No? All right. Well, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to throw out one quick question. I come from a science museum, and I think that we're working on several projects that are related to storytelling and really sort of the human side of science. I think one of the things we struggled with a little bit on the funding applications for some of the digital projects was, where does science fit in that conversation? And it's not an anthropology and it's not an archaeology conversation, which were the two disciplines that were sort of mentioned in the application. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you guys look at science content in sort of the general conversation of humanities.
Sure. We do have sort of in our founding legislation a definition of the humanities, and it includes some disciplines that, as you said, anthropology, archaeology, that sort of span both sides. But we are really looking for other kinds of projects that are really interdisciplinary with other sciences as well. As long as you're sort of able to, I think in a lot of cases it's a framing issue more than anything else. Do you have other scholars or museum professionals, others who are very firmly within a humanities discipline on your team? How are you collaborating with them? How are you making it sort of more relevant? We find tons of work in the history of science, for instance, that sort of brings those kinds of things together. And we have given a couple of grants to We gave a grant actually working with Zooniverse to the Adler Planetarium, where they're looking at celestial maps, for instance, so sort of bringing together the sciences and the humanities there. So there are a lot of examples. Again, our Division of Public Programs works quite closely. They often go to the ASTC meeting and work with Censor. I don't know the acronym for that, but working on a lot of science education kinds of initiatives and thinking about how the humanities can be involved. And we've also been involved in a lot of the conversations around sort of the STEAM. I'm always trying to fit an H in there, like STEAM or something, to have the humanities be part of the STEM, all the STEM work that's going on. So trying to think of ways that we can sort of organically have those partnerships rather than, shoving the humanities where it doesn't necessarily work. Yes, so again, we're happy. This is the point, though, I definitely want to encourage all of you to get in touch with us when you have project ideas, because that's exactly the kind of thing where if we can read a draft of a proposal, and we will read drafts for most of our programs, where we can really help you frame and give examples of a project so that you're making the best case you can that your project actually is relevant to the NEH.
On that note, the office did look at our grant application, and I think we wouldn't have gotten the grant without it. Ours was, the biggest feedback for us was not a framing issue, it was more, we want to know technically how you're going to do this, and so that spurred us at the last minute to find a designer and build some wireframes, but I think that was a make or break.
That's exactly the kind of, right, exactly. So what details are not there? We can't necessarily take your project from just completely not knowing quite where you're going to being perfect. That's definitely not, neither our job or what we could do feasibly, but definitely we can help as much as we can in sort of reading, offering feedback, thinking about other projects sort of in your ecosystem that you might be able to touch on in a proposal. So, we've seen a lot come through the door. All right, well, I think we're about out of time, but thank you all very much. I'll be here for a few minutes if you want to chat.